This is episode 60 of the 99 Forever podcast. I'm Eric Friesen, and my guest tonight is making his second appearance on the podcast and his first in more than a year. He's the co-host of Straight Off the Pipe and a contributor for HeavyHockey.com, Mike Dashney, a.k.a. Dash in the Park. Dash, welcome back to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. We've got a long way to go to catch up to your number of appearances on Michael's podcast, but at least this is a good start.
Yeah, what did I just finish off number 33 or something like that? I don't know if I've caught you yet, though. There might be, we've probably got a good 60 or 70 between us.
Yeah, no kidding. Michael and I have joked about that before, that we need to go back and count all of our episodes together back to 2018. So it's probably around there. You might actually have me beat, though.
Well, who knows? No one's ever going to have the time to go back and count anyways. But I just appreciate the really lavish, really expensive gifts he sends after being a guest. He's just such a generous guy.
Oh, yeah, I haven't received any of those myself.
Oh, that's awkward. Yeah, they're what I tell you, my mailbox I can barely contain it. Maybe just, Michael, they're just so expensive.
He's just extra giving at the holiday season, right?
All the year through.
Oh, there you go. So we'll get into some Oilers talk in a bit, but first I wanted to talk about the Heavy Hockey Minute that you made to preview the Battle of Alberta earlier this week. And I think it's the best one we've ever done for the site for a few reasons. First off, you recorded it in Disneyland, and that alone probably puts it at the top. But you also included some clips of Connor McDavid's series-winning goal against the Flames last spring, as well as a scene from Slapshot. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, I encourage them to go watch it on our YouTube channel. I just want to ask, did you have that planned ahead of time, or was this just something you came up on the spot with?
I did that one off the cuff, to be honest. The only credit I'm going to give away is to my brother-in-law, because he was the one who was making fun of Johnny Gaudreau or Mr. Hockey being on the teacup. So I have to give him credit. He made me laugh when he said it, and I said, I'm going to use that one. But yeah, no, you know what? It's pretty easy to do that when you're, in the place that's made of fun and magic, and Disneyland brings the best out of everybody. So it was fun to do. A little bit annoying to do because it was about 3 takes, only because it is impossible to find 60 seconds of quiet at Disneyland.
Yeah, I believe it. And, that's awesome, man. I'm a big Disney fan myself. I love Disneyland. I've been there 5 times. What's your favorite ride at the park?
This time we really honestly focused on the kids that we had with us. So, there was just a lot of teacups and balloon rides and that sort of thing. We got on the carousel 3 times. But a while back, I went to Disney World, and maybe you're aware that there's 9 different parks there if you count the water parks and the marble parks. And we booked a 10-day trip, and just 2 of us did 9 parks in 10 days. And the 10th day was for rest. We just lay beside the pool and melted, and I think at that time the count was 27 roller coasters across the 7 parks. And we did 26 of them. The only one we couldn't finish off was the Aerosmith rock and roll roller coaster. It was the last roller coaster on the last day, and it was a 2.5-hour lineup, and we just tapped out. We couldn't do it.
Yeah, no, I believe it. That sounds like it would be a long trip going there for 10 days. But I'll go with Space Mountain, Indiana Jones, and the Matterhorn as my top 3 rides at Disneyland. Like I said, I've been I'm more of a California guy, so I've been to Disneyland, like I said, a lot of times. I've never been to Disney World. I want to check it out. One of the things that I've heard that's a little different there, though, is, when you're in Disneyland, the park is right across the street from all the hotels, whereas I think you have to take a shuttle bus to get to the parks at Disney World in Orlando.
Yeah, sheer mass alone. I mean, it's just spread out there. It's probably 10 times the size. Yeah. So by the time, you've gone to Epcot and then Animal Kingdom and then, so on and so forth, and mix it up and go to a water park to Blizzard Beach or Typhoon Lagoon, you've been, it feels like, halfway across Florida State. So yeah, there's a lot of traveling around, but that's why we did it the way we did, 1 park per day. we still averaged about 15 to 20,000 steps every single day. So there's no way you could do it. But we were troopers.
Yeah, you're getting your exercise in there for sure. How long were you in Anaheim? And I think you went to Hawaii too as well, right?
Yeah, we went to Kauai for 10 days and then topped it off the 2 weeks with 4 days in Anaheim just to get kids and the nieces over to Disneyland. So it was fun. Kauai was beautiful. First time to Hawaii. Just absolute paradise. Let's see what they say.
Oh man, you're making me wish I was there. I've never been to Hawaii. I have been to Mexico a few times. I love it there. So anywhere with a beach, it doesn't take much to sell me on that. Was this also your little guy's first time at Disneyland?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so that was the fun in it for me. I was just living vicariously through him.
And how did he like it? What was his first time there like?
Pretty overwhelming for the most part, I think, but and it rained for the second half of the day. So he was, proved to me how tough he is, because I think he did less whining than I did. Ultimately, Autotopia was what he had the funnest 5 minutes of his life on. Yeah, I couldn't get that smile off his face for 20 minutes. He was just absolutely enamored with that one. Anything where he can drive with that, he's pretty funny.
Yeah, and I'm sure that he'll be asking in the next year or two, like, when are we going back?
Oh, 15 years, kid.
Well, man, I'm glad you had a great vacation, and it's always a good time at the happiest place on earth. And Oilers fans sure were happy after an important win over their provincial rivals on Tuesday night as well. Tyson Barrie scored his 100th career NHL goal. Connor McDavid tallied his league-leading 31st goal of the season, and Stuart Skinner made 46 saves as the Edmonton Oilers won the game and the season series against the Calgary Flames 2-1. Dash, I think we have to start by talking about Skinner. He had a bit of a tough outing against the Vancouver Canucks before the Christmas break, but he bounced back with one of his best performances of the season in Calgary. What can you say about how the Oilers' rookie goalie played in the Battle of Alberta?
Oh, he was everything for that game. We mock about the 3 stars all being one player every once in a while, but that's one of those games where he clearly was the first, second, and third star. I know, McDavid or Mangiapane or whoever got those other stars. Maybe it was Richie. I can't remember. Without Skinner, they don't even come close to winning that game. I don't know if you looked at any of the underlying statistics, or analytics. Corsi was 60 in the first period, and Fenwick around the same, 70 in the second period, and 82 and the 85%, all for the Flames. They absolutely controlled it in shots. They controlled it in possession. They controlled it in volume of shots. High danger scoring chances were 16-6. Skinner doesn't play the way Skinner plays. That game doesn't happen. Fair to say, if Skinner isn't playing the way he's playing, the Oilers might not be in a playoff hunt right now, man.
Yeah, I mean, without Skinner between the pipes, I don't think the Oilers win that game. He was superb again, and he really needed to be, like you said. And, in the 3 games against the Flames this season, Skinner has stopped 117 of 120 shots for a .975 save percentage. It was also hit the 9th time this season where Skinner has posted a .933 save percentage or better. And like you said, they controlled a lot of the play. They had a wide majority more shots on goal as well as shot attempts. But even though he faced a ton of rubber, I didn't think that the Flames had that many quality looks after the first period. They hit a couple posts on their other best chances. The Flames are a team that we know that also likes to shoot from everywhere. They rank 3rd in the league in shots on goal per game, but they're only 22nd in the league in goals per game. So I don't know how many chances other than that late one that with 6 seconds left that rang off the post that you can say was a really dangerous look for the Flames in the 3rd period. So I thought the Oilers did a good job overall of keeping most of their shots to the outside. And this was also only the 2nd time all season that Edmonton has held an opponent to under 2 goals. So that's another big positive for this team to win a low-scoring game on the road against their biggest rival.
I mean, Connor said it in his post game. They don't want to be winning games 7-6 and 5-4. These are the games you got to win. You got to win the 2-1 games, and that's what they did. again, on the back of Skinner. I love what you said there about him stopping 117 of the 120 shots he's faced against the Flames, because I wanted to mention that, the real story here isn't that the Oilers have given up 120 shots in 3 games. They've actually given up 131 shots in 3 games against the Flames.
If you include the Jack Campbell shots, yeah.
For sure, right? And he gave up 4 goals in 11 shots versus the Flames, and Skinner has given up 3 goals and 120 shots versus the Flames. So bit of a massive gap when you're talking about a 6.36 save percentage versus a 9.75 save percentage in the performance of your 2 goalies for your team. Needless to say, I'd say Stu will probably be getting the start in the playoffs versus the Flames too. Prediction, spoiler. But, the other part of that is we've given up 131 shots versus the Flames in 3 games. And whether you can keep that up and continue success is to be seen. I do have a little bit of an issue, and will take issue with all of this crap about the posts. Like, honestly, I'm a little bit tired of it. You know what? How do you lose because of a post, Flames fans? Oilers Nation or Flames Nation posted that. Like, you lost because you hit the post? No, you lost because you didn't score. Like, why is Skinner covered just enough mesh as he needed to, right? Like, how do you know Skinner doesn't know that's hitting the post? Those goalies are machines. They're calibrated machines. Like, so what? You hit the post. Have better aim.
I think the more frustrating thing was seeing Flames fans on Twitter. Someone would retweet something and pop up on my timeline, and it would say that the Oilers only won because the refs helped them in that game. And I'm thinking the refs helped them. There was several pretty obvious calls that they missed. If anything, the Oilers deserved several more power plays. Now, I will also say that the Oilers probably got away with a couple. There was the hold that Zach Hyman had on the stick in the third period, but I can think back to the first period, a couple interferences that were missed, and obviously a bigger one that we'll talk about in a bit. But yeah, to blame their loss on officiating, I think that's or to even say that the Oilers only won because they were gifted these power plays, I think that's a ridiculous take.
It kind of reminds you of, who was it, Oliver Shillington, that said that they lost to one guy.
And which guy is that?
Was that Connor McDavid, or was that the guy on one leg that broke 5 of Gretzky's records in 5 games against you?
I mean, it could have even been Zach Hyman, who set another Oilers record for scoring in 5 straight playoff games. Connor McDavid, like you said, who was, right up there with Draisaitl as the most dominant player in the series. Draisaitl set the NHL record for most points in a playoff series. McDavid scores the game winner.
Those consecutive
and the series winner, yeah,
games, the assist games, Gretzky's records, NHL records, and they got beat by one guy. I mean, really, the ultimate joke there is the one guy they got beat by was Jacob Markstrom.
Yeah, and I've heard that one a few times. I like that. But it's one of those things. It's the rivalry, right? I think it's pretty hard for the opposition fans to give credit to the other team a lot of the times, especially when the Oilers have now won, I believe, 4 consecutive games in the Saddledome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they'll hopefully, if your prediction holds right, win a couple more in the playoffs this coming spring. And I already mentioned that Barrie scored his 100th goal of his career in the win over the Flames. He had been sitting on 99 for a month. So it was great to see him finally hit the century mark. And, he's on pace for a career high 64 points this season. I think Barrie's been an excellent fit with this group from the moment he arrived in Edmonton, but there is a portion of the fan base that thought that the Oilers should have traded him this offseason for a more defensive-minded defenseman, especially after Evan Bouchard put up 43 points as a rookie last year. I just want to know, how would you rate Barrie's play so far this season, and would you like to see him be a part of this team for another couple of years?
I think... Man, I'll get burnt for this. I think losing Keith meant we had to keep Barrie. I just we'd already let. Geez, it was my own tweet, and I don't remember what it is. I think we let 8 of our 9 most elder players move on last year. 8 of our 9 oldest players on the team. It was like thousands and thousands and thousands of game in man experience gone. when you add up Smith and Koskinen and Keith and Cassian and guys like Turris and that took thousands of games with them, you got Tyson Barrie out too. That leaves a way too young of a D-core and on a team that already needs some help on D. And we all knew that. That's okay, right? I mean, in the pregame shows, we talked about this, Eric. All of us did. We said this is good enough to get us to the playoffs. This will get us into the playoffs, and we'll get somebody at the trade deadline if we can work around the cap, and then the boys will go nuclear, right? Like, this is kind of falling into plan. We're just in the bottom of a dip right now. I know you're the most positive Oiler fan up there. I'm out there. So I'm not going to come on your show and be negative Nancy. I think my prediction that I gave on the pregame show is going to be true. I do. I think we'll get to the Flames in the second round, just like we did last year. Or maybe it ends up being in the first round, given the Flames' performance this year. But I hope it happens. I think it happens, and we'll blow by them like we did last time. Tyson Barrie has been necessary. Tyson Barrie has been solid. Tyson Barrie has been what we would expect him to be, with a bit more. I think it's great to see him up in the top 10 in scoring for defensemen again, but he's been there before. He did that with Colorado. He's done that with Edmonton before. The underlying analytics would say that he's, and on the old bell curve, he might be riding a bit of a high, right? When you look at some of the expected goals for or his relative Corsi or relative Fenwick, and they're, he's at a high career high in shooting percentage. There's some things there that maybe start to balance out a little bit, and he reverses back to the mean. But that said, how can we complain? Nurse has had his ups and downs, and literally and mentally and on the ice as well. And CC's been okay, but not as good as last year. Kulak's been okay, but not as good as last year. So Bear's just been necessary and done a heck of a job doing it. So congratulations for 100 goals, bud.
Yeah, exactly. I was great to see him get the milestone. It would have been even better if he could have done it on the dad's trip while his old man Len Barrie was there in either Nashville or Dallas.
Yep. Yeah, gotta love Len. Gotta love Tyson. He's good in the room.
So yeah, he's good with this group, and I know his critics will point to him losing inside position in front of the net from time to time, or getting caught puck watching in the defensive zone. But I mean, most offensive defensemen aren't great in their own zone. That's just something we have to accept. But what he does better than any other defender on the team is produce points. I think that eventually Evan Bouchard is going to ascend past him and become the Oilers' top offensive defenseman for a decade or longer. But as of right now, Barrie is still the guy. And if they would have moved on from him last season and just banked on Bouchard to step in and take that spot, Bouchard's having a little bit of a sophomore slump after an excellent rookie campaign. And maybe he's missing Duncan Keith too, as you mentioned. Like you looked at what a mentor he was for him last season. There was a 16-year age difference between Bouchard and Keith. That's probably the biggest gap in the entire league between line mates or D partners. But, you look at Barrie, like I said, he produces points better than anyone else on this team on the back end. He could become only the third defenseman in Oilers history to record 60 points in a single season, and the first since Paul Coffey in 1986-87. He also led the league in points among defensemen 2 years ago with 48 points in 56 games. And last year, in what some people consider a down year, he still had 41 points. And if you think back over the last decade, there haven't been a lot of Oilers defensemen that have put up 40 points. He moves the puck well along the blue line to create different shooting angles. He gets the puck to McDavid and Draisaitl in good spots in the offensive zone, especially on the power play. And he can comfortably break the puck out of his own zone. So even though Barrie leaves much to be desired defensively, he makes up for it with his offense, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no doubt. I think the torch just still being passed. That's probably part of it. I think it's Barrie's job as we move on here to take what Keith did. I remember Bouchard actually mentioning in a postseason article that there was a particular game when Bouchard and Keith got paired last year. And you know how much I love Duncan Keith. You know, I've been on the rooftops and that for a year. That was his biggest contribution, I believe, to the Oilers was kind of teaching Bouchard how to play positionally. When they got paired, that was when Bouchard really turned his season around last year. And Bouchard said in a postseason interview, Keith just told me, quite literally, cut the ice in half. That's your half. This is my half. Mm-hmm. Simple as that. And when that happened, good things came. And, you know, without Keith here, Barrie can do that. Barrie's been paired with Bouchard quite a bit this year, mostly with Kulak. But the times he's been with Bouchard, they've actually statistically and analytically been the best pairing for the Oilers. There's far and away better Corsi, Fenwick, and relative even offensive possession-wise. Barrie and Bouchard actually trend really, really well as a pair as well. So, and actually I checked a natural stat trick before I came on, and Barrie has played with 8 different partners this year, you know, and so that says something too, right? Like it's a coaching role. And I think the other part of it is Bouchard is going to be a bit of a slow developing defenseman. You know, they say that magic games played is maybe 200 in the NHL when you really start to figure it out and you really start to get that tipping point, if you will. And, you know, Bouchard's not there yet. Or is he? No, not even close. So 138, there it is. So, you know, give him a whole another season and a bit before he really starts to figure it out. And I liken his game to Nuge on the back end, right? There's that ability to hold on to the puck and keep it on your stick till the absolute perfect time. A really, you know, kind of elusive game, really good at finding lanes, really good at producing opportunities, can shoot the puck when they need to, maybe a little bit too soft, but that's okay, right? Like, do you see those similarities?
Yeah.
Other than one looks like he's 12 and the other looks like he's 42. But,
you know, I think the thing is with Bouchard, the two main skills that he has that are going to make him such a valuable player on this team for the next decade is his ability to make long stretch passes. And I can just envision him setting McDavid on so many breakaways in the years to come. And also that slap shot from the blue line. And we haven't had a shot like that from the point, maybe since Sheldon Surrey was here over a decade ago. So
to start the sentence, that's what I was going to say. No doubt about it. I agree.
Yeah. So when you have that much talent around him that he can distribute the puck to in the offensive zone and allow the guys like McDavid and Draisaitl work their magic, now having that new component where there's a big shot that the defense has to account for too, that's either going to open up more room for McDavid and Draisaitl to create down low, or it's going to open up space for him up top. And you look at the 2 goals he scored against the Rangers and then the late game tying goal he had against the Panthers about a month ago. Both of those were just rockets from the top of the circle. And he's shown that he has this ability. It's just about maybe doing it a little more consistently now.
For sure. And once he can be able to apply it to the power play full time, I think.
Yeah. And for right now, because Barrie,
a top 10 offensive defenseman in the NHL for a long time.
Yeah, and just bringing it back to Barrie for a second, I like the idea of halfway through the power play, if they haven't scored, those 2 switching off, just to give Bouchard some more reps with the man advantage as well. But, you know, that group up front, I don't want to change that. I honestly think even bringing on the second unit for even the last 30 seconds decreases your chances to score. I would still almost take my chances with a tired McDavid and Draisaitl out there.
For sure. I mean, they finally start to, especially with Bouchard back there, it really gives them a third option because, you know, I've tried to liken it to the Washington power play, right? When it was a one-trick pony with Ovi in his office, you knew where it was going. You knew that he was sneaking in from the boards, getting it at the top of the circles. Well, it's the same thing for Draisaitl. He's just got a different office, right? It's the other circle and it's down at the hash marks. And they do the same thing. They like pretend they're not even part of the play. I'm just sitting here in the corner. Don't mind me. And before you know it, they're ready and loaded. Whereas Ovi and Washington got very dangerous once Kuznetsov and John Carlson could do it too. And now they've got their Kuznetsov and Carlson because the evolution of Ryan Nugent-Hopkins stop this year has been phenomenal. McDavid's shooting more. When Bouchard's out there, like there's just a revolving, who the hell do we cover?
Yeah, it's not just the one-timer to Draisaitl. I still think that's their best shot on the power play is the big one-timer from low in the right circle to Draisaitl, but they have more options now that the defense can't just cheat to cover Leon.
Which happened, absolutely. There's no doubt in the playoffs that started to happen where he got that attention. But, I mean, what Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is doing on the other side is really like there's a linear connection between how much he's improved his game and how we've got our power play back up to 33% again.
For sure. And the other thing is, yes, the Oilers do need to improve defensively. They do need to cut down the goals against. But I didn't think that Barrie would be the player that would be moved out to fill that need or that void. I think the right side is pretty set for the moment. If the Oilers are going to bring in another defenseman, I always figured it was going to be on the left side. That gives Broberg a little more time to season in the minors and get a little more experience down there. And he's been excellent when he has played in the AHL this season. The other thing is too, like if they do end up bringing in a Jacob Chychrun, or if it's another cheaper, maybe more defensive defenseman type that they look to bring in March, that's probably going to be the third or second pairing on the left side that either moves Kulak down or plays below him, depending on, like I said, the caliber of player they bring in. But don't you agree that that's where they'll probably look to bring in? I don't think they're bringing in another right shot. It'll probably be a left shot guy.
I wouldn't be surprised if they're able to, that they bring in one of each. That said, I will agree with you in saying the priority is on the left side, and Broberg is the biggest part of that, and you nailed it. So I won't go over that again. But what I would like to see, first things first, Jacob Chychrun, no thanks. I've loved his game at times, but he's inconsistent. He's injury prone. He plays 6 out of every 10 games for his entire career. I don't know. I'd rather have the Radko Gudas or the Joel Edmondson or the Luke Shen on the back end that just can settle things down when they need to, create some intensity, create some intimidation, create some fear in the opponents to stay away from our crease, and maybe have just a little bit of muscle out there to make sure we're not getting taken advantage of. I just don't see how Jacob Chychrun fits any of what we really truly need, and that's going to be tough to fit under the cap unless we're sending out a player like Puljujarvi, which maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't.
I see what you're saying. Like, sorry.
We got to make it work under the cap, and that's the hard part.
And his cap hit isn't too big either. It's like $4.6 million, I think, for the next 3 years. But they would still have to send out another player. The thing that I think with Chychrun is that it's like you said, the injury concerns are something that the Oilers would have to take into consideration. But he's a plus player on a horrible Arizona team. So that tells me that at least when he's on the ice, a lot of the damage isn't being done. And the fact that he's been producing at almost a point per game clip since he came back from injury this season, it's like there's a 24-year-old defenseman who is able to produce at an elite level and is also solid defensively. I think that if they could make it work, he would be such a great fit on this team. It's just a matter of, the reported asking price. Is it going to be 2 first-round picks, a second, and a prospect? That's just so rich. And I think that that's probably the biggest reason why he hasn't been traded yet, is that Arizona's just asking for too much right now. And a lot of teams are probably scared, as you said, to dish out that many assets for a player who has a history of injury problems.
It's not worth the opportunity cost for me, right? Like, it's first-round picks are
the Oilers do need to make something happen. Like, this is the time with McDavid and Draisaitl in their prime. Like, I always am a big believer in holding on to your first-round picks as well, especially in a draft as deep as the 2023 draft. But if they have an opportunity to bring in a Patrick Kane or Jonathan Taves or Jacob Chychrun this year, or whoever it may be, like a player who's going to be an impact player for your roster. I think that you could separate with a first round pick if you're getting that type of player.
For that type of player in a win now scenario, for sure. But if we have to give up Broberg and a first and Polyarvi,
not for a rental. If it's for a player who's going to be around, then that's a different story. But not for a rental. And maybe Gudas is the player that will be a cheaper option for the Oilers to bring in, and he'd have a little more of that snarl and that physicality that you're looking for on the back end. He's not going to produce offense like a Chychrun will, but he might even be better defensively, and there will be a lot of opponents that'll be scared to go anywhere near the Oilers' net with him on the back end.
Well, Dave Manson's going to apply that guy correctly too. And yes. I think he needs a little bit of that and what Dave Manson puts out there. So, yeah, I wouldn't hate to see Chychrun skating around in an Oilers uniform and doing what he could do. But in all of that you said, as much as I don't disagree with you, the key thing you said in there is when he came back from injury this year. Mm-hmm. Just always hurt. And what if that next injury is 3 weeks before the playoffs? Now what? Right? It's just
especially when you've paid that many assets.
Yes, that's what I mean. It's not worth the opportunity cost. I think we can plug those holes in other ways.
And I think that Chychrun will eventually. Somebody's going to throw $9 million or $8 million at him on his next contract, just because that's what the cost for top pairing defensemen seems to be these days, especially. Considering that he still has 3 years on his deal. So you'd be getting a value contract for that period of time. But it would be very tough for the Oilers to keep him beyond that if they were able to trade for him, just because even if the salary cap goes up, you're going to be giving a lot of that extra money that you're getting to McDavid and Draisaitl's new contracts that will be needing to kick in at that time. So I think it would be like a 3-year window with Chychrun before he, was lost to free agency. So if you're willing to give up that much because you believe that you can win in the next 3 years, and I do believe that the Oilers can win in the next 3 years, then I see the reasoning behind it. But I would still also hope that if they do bring in that player, that Arizona comes down on their asking price a little bit.
Yes. Yep. I still hope they shop elsewhere, but yes. I think somebody else will take this. Somebody else will get desperate. I think Chychrun goes elsewhere.
And in the third period against the Flames, Connor McDavid scored his league-leading 31st goal of the season, which also stood up as the game winner. McDavid now has 13 goals in as many games in December and is on pace for an incredible 71 goals this year. Dash, are we far enough into the season where you think 70 goals is realistic for McDavid?
Part of me hates these questions because how do you ever bet against Connor McDavid? Just 70 goals is a lot, man. That's so many goals.
But you know what? Sorry to cut you off, but I remember a month ago he was on pace for 73 goals, and people are thinking oh yeah, it's November, he's on pace for 73 goals. That's all fine. It's going to come down. Here we are a month later in December, and he's still on pace for 71. Now we're, approaching the midway point of the season, and he's still scoring at this incredible clip. I mean, at what point does this just become reality and not a pipe dream?
It's, maybe Woodcroft said it best. When the people that live at the foot of Mount Everest are just wake up and look at Magistry every day. And that's he's magic. He's just magic. And we're so lucky, first things first, but it's hard to, I don't think he'll score 70, Eric. I can't say that. I didn't think he'd score 60 when we did it on the pregame show, but now I think I'm ridiculous to have said that. I'll remind you, Michael Hubert said he wouldn't score 50. I also said at the pregame show that Connor McDavid will score as many goals as Connor McDavid decides he wants to score, quote unquote, because spend your training in Ontario with Austin Matthews and sit there and have your bragging rights. If I was Austin Matthews, I'd have brought my Richard trophy to the workouts.
Well, they were
right?
training
Like
together down
Connor
in
goes,
Arizona even during the
yeah,
pandemic. So like, I mean, I sometimes wonder, did they pick up some things from each other? Like, did Austin
of
work on his skating with Connor? Did Connor work on his shot with Austin?
course, of course. You know what? It's like elite players that know elite things, right? Like they could have a conversation that LeBron James and Michael Jordan could have. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? Like maybe that's giving them too much credit, but it's, Connor McDavid can't come off the street and have that conversation with you or me at supper. We
No.
don't understand what Austin Matthews sees when he's using all the different angles of his stick and his release points and how he can fool goalies by disguising and looking things off. And man, there's like that's what we know about, right? Like it's, of course they're talking about it and you don't think that they're competitive about it. They're two of the best players on the planet. He brings his Rocket Richard trophy and sets it right beside Connor while he's doing his lunge squats. And Connor kind of gets a little red because he's competitive. And he goes, oh, yeah, we'll see. Right? Like, I don't know. Connor McDavid does what Connor McDavid wants to do.
Yeah. And I mean, right from opening night, it seemed like McDavid has been on a mission to climb from being a 40-goal scorer to a Rocket Richard trophy winner. And I think that he will get that this year. But it's not just about getting the Rocket Richard trophy or getting the Art Ross trophy. I'm confident he'll get the Art Ross trophy again for sure. And the Rocket looks like it's likely as well. But I think he wants to see how high he can push these totals. And many of the goals that McDavid scores are dazzling coast to coast rushes, but now he's become one of the most dangerous shooters in the league from the slot area. He's started to utilize his shot more this season and be a little more selfish when prime shooting options present themselves. And just last week, McDavid became the first player to score 30 goals before Christmas since Alex Ovechkin in 2013-14, and the first Oiler to do it since Wayne Gretzky in 1986-87. But if he scores 70 goals in a single season, that would easily be one of the greatest individual accomplishments by an NHL player in the 21st century. And for McDavid to reach the 70-goal plateau, he needs 39 goals in the final 46 games this season. And while that sounds like a daunting task, even for the best player in the world, I think McDavid has both the ability and the internal drive to score 70 this year.
And a line mate that'll help him do it. I mean, not a bad decoy over there.
No, and let's not forget that in that interview with Elliot Friedman before the season, Leon Draisaitl told him that he had talked to Connor in the offseason and said, you need to score 60 goals this year. And it almost seems like McDavid's taken that to heart and come out committed to score at least 60 and possibly 70.
Challenge accepted, Leo. Like we were at the beginning of this season going, yeah, you think Connor could ever win a Rocket? And we're 30 how many games later? 36 games later, and we're saying, will he ever lose the Rocket? Right?
And he'd be the first Oiler to lead the league in goals since Wayne Gretzky again in 1986-87. And I just feel like it's time. He's in the absolute prime of his career. He's always going to be a pass first guy. But I think that, now that he's sort of added this new element to his game as a lethal goal scorer as well, he's just become a complete scoring machine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun to watch. It's incredible to watch. It's majestic.
So whether or not you think he's going to get to 70, do you have a number in mind of what you really think that he's going to reach this year?
I'd have to go away from my pre-season predictions of which I said
an updated prediction. An updated prediction as of right now.
Yeah, I thought 55. So if it's 65, that's still pretty darn impressive. If he gets 60 goals, that's pretty impressive. The key will be staying healthy. If Connor McDavid plays every game for the rest of the season and Draisaitl's healthy and everybody decides that they just want to make some magic, maybe it's 50 and 50. Maybe it's 70. I don't know. I didn't think Barry Bonds would get to 70 home runs. So, you know what I mean? Like it's just eventually they blow you away and it happens. So Wouldn't be surprised if he got 75.
Ovechkin also has the most goals in a single season in the salary cap era with 65. So if Connor could get past that, that would be a pretty impressive feat to have a better goal scoring season than the player who many people believe is the best pure goal scorer of all time.
He is without a shadow of a doubt the best pure goal scorer of all time. Got 22 again this year, Eric. When's he going to slow down?
He's thought he would by
280
now.
pounds and has gray hair and a gray beard, and he is just pumping home goals like it's 2020 or 2012, whatever year.
No, I know what you mean. I figured that I didn't even think that he would catch Gordie Howe if he would have asked me 5 years ago, but he's just continued to be a dominant goal scorer. And even though, like, as a huge Wayne Gretzky fan, I want him to hold on to the record, it's starting to look more and more like that, even if it takes Ovi a couple more years, that he's eventually going to get there.
I'm in the exact same canoe, buddy. There's no doubt. Yeah, I want Gretz to hold it, but I do really think it's going to happen. I think it's just that same type. Just special people have that mentality and that drive, right? If they're going to accomplish something, they just end up accomplishing it. And it just looks like he's on that pace.
The other big story to come out of the Battle of Alberta was Flames defenseman Mackenzie Weegar, who threw a knee-on-knee hit on McDavid. And none of McDavid's teammates responded physically, and there was also no penalty called on the play. Considering the major injury that McDavid suffered in that same building almost 4 years ago, there were probably plenty of Oilers fans that were both furious and scared at the same time when Weegar threw that dangerous hit. And it was a tight 1-1 game at the time in their last head-to-head meeting of the regular season. But Dash, does there need to be more of a response from the Oilers when something like that happens to their captain?
The ghost of Mark Giordano entered Mackenzie Weegar.
Ugh, don't even say his name.
It's, I thought it was broken down. Okay, well, first things first. I thought it was broken down very well by Josh Bolton from Tough Call. Anybody who has a chance, Tough Call on YouTube breaks down that hit and slows it down, reverses angles. And as he always does, he does a brilliant job of kind of, I don't know, slowing it and showing, where skates are pointing and why, and how, Weegar really did do everything in his best effort to just kind of not get burnt. I mean, he got roasted is what happened. And
we saw that against Edler earlier in the season, where he could see that Connor was going to make a lateral move on him and burn him wide. And instead, what does he do? He sticks out his knee at the last second because he knows that that's the only way he's going to be able to take away the ice from Connor. And it just, Darnell Nurse did respond physically that time, but it's just how can we just let these go by, that just because he's faster than everyone else, it's almost like an excuse for them to try and throw these dangerous hits.
And that's the other half of it, right? We could sit here and debate whether Weegar threw a knee or not. I'm not even fully convinced he did. I think he should have got 2 minutes for tripping, like Tough Call said, and maybe that's a staunch take, but the key thing that you're bringing up is that we can't open up the door and leave a, signed invitation for people to walk in and be able to do whatever they want to the two best players on our team. And, the response, it's necessary. It's hockey. I'm sorry. I mean, it's been till the end of time. I'm sure hockey's been cleaned up and fighting's been decreased, and intimidation is 100% the part of the game. 120% part of the game. The St. Louis Blues won a Stanley Cup on intimidation. It's absolutely necessary, and we can't have Darnell Nurse as our number one defenseman, like it or not. He is, and you can't have him breaking hands. You can't have him in the penalty box.
Yeah,
he's your number one.
He can't fight as much as he used to. And maybe and to go back to your earlier point, maybe that's where bringing in a guy like Gudas, or, finding another fourth line cheap option who could step up in the absence of Cassian as well, where someone is going to be willing to drop the gloves in these situations. I also think that there would have been more of a response if the Oilers were, let's say, 6 points higher in the standing and maybe had a 3-1 lead in that game. But when it's a tight hockey game and you're battling for a playoff position with your biggest rival, you can't afford to take a penalty in that situation by retaliation. And, instead the Oilers got their own power play shortly thereafter, and McDavid scored on it. So making them pay on the scoreboard is better, in my opinion, too.
Absolutely.
That's where you really hurt them.
We score on 1 out of every 3 power plays with a 33% success rate, and that was our third power play. Poetry in motion, just like it was drawn up.
Without a doubt. And when you were on this podcast last year, we talked about the Oilers having a chance to break the NHL record for the highest power play percentage in a single season. They ended up finishing third in the league on the man advantage in 2021-22 after leading the league in each of the previous 2 seasons. But as of right now, the Oilers have the highest power play percentage in NHL history at 32.3%, ahead of the 1977-78 Montreal Canadiens, who finished with a 31.9%. Dash, in your opinion, do the Oilers have the most lethal power play the game has ever seen?
I do think so. And I mean, statistically, and meets the eye test for me. Ultimately, they were breaking the 30 to 35-year-old record when they had a 29.5 in 1920. Was that? Yeah, 1920. Get that year mixed up because of COVID, but right. And then they, like you said, they dropped down to third place. I can't remember what it was, 27, 28% and 20.
Yeah, I think it was 29. Right around 27.
And here we are, right? 32.3. We're hovering at 33%. I hinted at it earlier, and I'll say it again. I really believe the success of the power play this year, and it's gotten better, is a linear connection with the improvement of Ryan Nugent-Hopkins' game. He's developed a third threat with a shot on the other side of the ice. I don't know if many play the half wall on the power play as well as Nuge. We mentioned it when we compared his game with Bouchard, that he protects the puck so well. He just, Josh at Tough Call and I were talking about this in a side conversation earlier, and watching him break down the Flames penalty kill on his channel again, he just does such a great job of slowing things down and showing how well Nuge is at creating opportunities, and how he doesn't lose the puck.
He's the perfect complement for the 2 best players in the world. He's so sure-handed. And he's a power play specialist. He has been going back all the way to his junior days. This is where he really thrives.
Is phenomenal at creating space. And so when you're creating, all you need is an extra second in the NHL, right? That's all you need. And when you're creating that much, when you're one of the best players at creating space for your teammates on the power play, and your teammates on the power play are 29 and 97, you're destined to have the most lethal power play in the history of hockey.
Yeah.
That's, write it down, and you heard it here first. Eric Friesen and Dashney will have the best power play in the history of hockey by the end of the season.
I mean, just with McDavid and Draisaitl alone, you have a pretty good foundation right there. The 2 best offensive players in the league, both in their mid-20s at their peak abilities. Now you're adding in, like we said, Nugent-Hopkins, who's such a good puck handler and passer. If you have Evander Kane or Zach Hyman as your net front presence, both of them are excellent goal scorers. Evander's a little bigger and stronger, but Zach Hyman, man, he's like a dog on the bone in front of the net. Like, he will just battle till the very last second till he hears that whistle.
His puck retrievals.
Yeah. So having him on the power play, adds a factor as well. That type of tenacity in front of the net, and then, just like we talked about earlier in the podcast, if you have a guy like Barrie or Bouchard manning the point, well, that's just another weapon for you. So it's no surprise at all that right now they're running at over 32% and have, as it stands, the best power play in NHL history. It's kind of funny, though, if you look back at the Gretzky-era Oilers, there's only one of those teams that's in the top 10 all time for power play percentage, and that was the 82-83 Oilers. They currently rank 8th all time at 29.3%. Are you ever surprised just that the 80s Oilers, the most dominant offensive team, the most creative team of all time, didn't have a higher power play percentage?
I think probably honestly what that comes down to is the clutching and grabbing.
That's a good point too.
Right, you could drag a water boat behind you and water ski on guys back in the 80s. So that was, I probably think, the biggest separation. I think if you put the 80s Oilers, all relative skill in the vacuum, and you apply these rules to today's NHL, they might have had a 50% power play, and I'm not kidding. So
the Oilers also did a lot of their damage off the rush too, and maybe having all that time to set up in the offensive zone. I mean, with Gretzky passing it to Curry and having Messier out there and Coffey, I mean, you're set up for success right there. But I honestly think because they were such a counterattack team that, like I said, created a lot of their chances flying down the ice, maybe the power play wasn't their specialty at that time.
Yeah, and it's, again, hard to compare because it's a different game. Like you said, the scoring came off the rush, and I remember it fondly. Now today is it's setting up off the cycle, right? I mean, maybe the 80s Oilers power play wouldn't have been all that successful if they'd had to set up on the cycle versus Jamie McCowan and Jim Poplinski. So I don't know, right? Gary Suter, throw that in the mix. So they scored how they had to, and we score how we have to.
They still had some great percentages, though. Like I'm looking at 84, 85, 85, 86. They were right around 25, 26% both, which is still an elite power play. It's just a few notches below where this year's power play is right now. And Wayne Gretzky even said that on an Oilers broadcast last season, that he thought that the current era Oilers with McDavid had a better power play than his era.
Well, the 2020 power play is how you set up and how you create gaps, how you use your lanes. And the 80s power plays were more of just an extension of real hockey, right? It was a lot of creating odd man rushes and getting shots and rebounds and creating high danger scoring chances. So I just have a hard time throwing them back and forth like that. The way that I see that this being the best power play in the history of hockey is, what if I put it to you this way? I mean, here, you have the entire pool of NHL players in front of you, and I want you to build a power play from all the best players in the entire NHL, okay? Who do you want playing center?
Well, probably Leon Draisaitl. Well, I mean, depending on where you swap them. I know Connor usually kind of plays the point on the power play, but I see what you're saying.
Right, so which goal scorer do you want in there? Well, let's take the league's leading goal scorer this year, Connor McDavid. Okay, well, who's the best passer in the league? Who's the second player you take on that power play? That's probably Leon Draisaitl. Oh, who's the best net front presence? Who has the most energy in the NHL? Who is the straw that stirs the drink that you want bouncing in, retrieving pucks, and going to the net? Probably Zach Hyman. You just said it when he was in Toronto.
Yeah.
Oh, well, who's the best half wall player? Who's the most creative, patient, calm player that makes his teammates better around him at all times? Like, there's guys like Nuge, but Nuge, honestly, and then maybe you go to somebody else on D, but you've got probably the four best players at their respective positions on the power play that all play for the Oilers.
And that's a great point too. And who knows, if the Oilers are able to trade for Patrick Kane at the deadline, which has been rumored for 6 months now, although Bob Stauffer was sort of hinting more recently that he thinks that Jonathan Toews has sort of switched to the Oilers' target instead of Patrick Kane. And I think Toews as a third line center would be an excellent choice for Edmonton as well. But if Patrick Kane came to Edmonton, and this is all just hypothetical, but who would he knock out of there? Because you're not going to bring Kane in and not have him on the power play. You'd hate for someone like Nuge to get pushed out. Maybe you actually just keep Nuge there and a guy like Hyman loses his spot there. But that would, that might even decrease from the power play. Who knows? They might try that out and say, we have too many passers out there. It actually helps to have a guy who's going to grind a little bit in front of the net.
You either go with 5 forwards and just watch the magic happen, sprinkle some pixie dust on it and say, go ahead. Or you load up Evander Kane, Patrick Kane, and Bouchard on a second power play.
Yeah. And you know what? I said earlier that
what
I
fun
would
tools
prefer
to have at your disposal.
Yeah. And I do like it when Jay Woodcroft gives the Oilers' first unit the whole 2 minutes, and hopefully they don't need it because they're going to score. But when you would have another option like a Patrick Kane, then if you throw him out there with a Dylan Holloway up front or Jesse Puljujarvi, you start to feel a lot better about that second unit too.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah, it would be fun to see, to be honest. I'm not sure how realistic it is, and we admitted that's pie in the sky, but
yeah,
you never know with hockey. My gut says Patrick Kane goes to the New York Rangers. If we could get somebody like Taves with that experience, like, I mean, that's your new Keith.
And do you think that Keith working for the
Blackhawk?
Yeah, and with Keith being an Oilers employee and working for them as in player development, do you think that maybe he calls up his old buddy and says, hey, Taves, I really loved playing in Edmonton last year. I think you'd like it too. And sort of sells him on coming here.
I'd be shocked if that already hasn't happened. Or wink, wink, nudge, nudge, their wives have talked. Okay? Like, of course that happens. There's no doubt. And of course, Holland would ask Keith to feel those things out. That's kind of one of the positions he would be in and the advantages he'd have of still being one of the good old boys. Have you happened to look at the face-off percentage leaders in the NHL recently?
I haven't looked at it probably since earlier in the season.
Jonathan Taves, 65%, and nobody else is above 55, I don't think. Maybe somebody was 56.
Yeah, so, I thought Leon was right around 55, 56 a while ago, but
he was 54. Yeah, so he just dropped that recently.
I mean, that alone, and when you add in
65%, that might be the highest in the last 20 years.
Do
you remember
Ryan
anybody
O'Reilly? I'd have to look. I'd have to look where O'Reilly would be at, but that would be right up there. And man, like you bring Taves in with his strong two-way play, his veteran experience. I just think even though the Oilers did learn a lot of lessons getting to the conference final last year, having a guy who's been on so many deep playoff runs and won 3 cups, the leadership that he would bring, plus being that steady third line center that now allows you to have Nuge on the wing if you want, or you could keep him on the third line with Taves as one of his wingers. You could bump him up to the second line on Leon's wing. There's so many options, and it makes your forward group even that much better because you're going to get Kane back around the or even before the trade deadline. So, and I think your bottom 6 becomes a lot stronger too. That has been an ongoing issue for the Oilers this year, a lack of production from their bottom 2 lines. But we've seen glimpses where they'll have a stretch of 3 games where you get a little bit of production from the bottom 6, but then they'll disappear for another 8 to 10 games. And having 2 guys like Nuge and Taves on your third line and maybe Dylan Holloway on the other wing, I think that you're just starting to see a much stronger looking bottom half of the roster.
I'd love to see it. I'm all in. I honestly, I would love that. And it also allows you to do more of the Radko Gudas type stuff on the back end. Yeah. So, put Seabrook in a hyperbaric chamber, whatever.
And you know what, Dash? As great as it was to see the Oilers beat the Flames this week, unless these teams meet in the playoffs again, as you predicted, this will be the final Battle of Alberta until the 2023 Heritage Classic 10 months from now. Given how exciting that playoff series was last year, do you think the NHL schedule makers need to do a better job than giving us only 3 games between the Oilers and Flames this year and playing all of them before New Year's Eve?
Well, it was odd, hey? And it was it's a calamity of oddities. Is that really all I can say? There's a guy that makes the schedule for the NHL. I can't remember his name offhand. But he's been doing it for 20 years. He's considered one of the higher management level people for the NHL, and he's from Montreal. His name's escaping me. But he's the one who finalizes the NHL schedule every year. And it is weird. And the timing is maybe the most weird or oddity thing of it. But it is actually just the mathematical formula of how things are going to be moving forward, with Seattle being in the division and now having 16 teams in the Western Conference. Because of the even division and even conference, it made that we couldn't play 4 games against every single one of our division rivals. So once Seattle entered the league, it now goes on a mathematical algorithm of 2 of every 7 years, we will only play 3 games against the Flames. 2 of every 7 years, we will only play 2 games against the Canucks, or 3 games against the Canucks, pardon me. So what happened last year is Seattle was the team that we only played 3 times. So everybody kind of just went, meh, right? Like, it didn't really quantify. So the first oddity of all of this is this falls on one of the cycles for twice in every 7 years that this will happen. The other oddity is that the only game in Edmonton is the second game in the year, right? There's going to be 39 more games played in Rogers Place after the Flames visit, and none of them are from Alberta. And the other oddity is that you played all 3 of them by December, right? And then for Edmontonians, the another oddity layered on is that we only got 1 game here. So all of that, with the cherry on top being that we had one of the most entertaining playoff rounds of all times, is just like, maybe that schedule maker could have waited till next year for that algorithm to go to the 2 of 7, right? So I don't know. It was very much an oversight, but I honestly find the entire other schedule a little bit odd this year. There's, being a season ticket holder, I noticed considerably that there's a lot less weekend games this year. The Saturday games especially have dropped off in number. I would say there's maybe 4 or 5 less this year. So it's just been an odd year all around, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's a fail by the NHL, without a shadow of a doubt.
I mean, I know how they want to do this, right? With, there's a certain number of teams in the division you're going to play 4 times and a certain number 3 times, but you'd think that Calgary and Edmonton should always be one of the matchups that play 4 times. I mean, just, I don't think they spaced it out well at all either. Give us 2 games early in the season and 2 down the stretch right before the playoffs, when they mean so much. Can you imagine how intense those games would be? That's a home and home. Yes. And even if you want to spread them out and have 1 in March and 1 in April, just those games, 1 in each building, would be like playoff atmospheres, basically, at that point. So I think they kind of robbed us of some exciting hockey games, first of all. And look, I'm not complaining that the Oilers won the season series, and it was a big regulation win against the Flames. But I just think that it was a pretty poor decision by the NHL to have all of them this early, especially when you want to have 2 in the first month. And it's like, well, we're like 10 games into the season. The Oilers and Flames only play 1 more time. So that was a mistake. Let's hope that next year they arrange it a little bit better. And like, we haven't even played the Sharks once yet. We've played Anaheim 1 time. There's so many other divisional games that they haven't played yet.
And I actually like the Bruce McCurdy solution. Take 2 games from the preseason, add them into the regular season, and with 84 games, you can play everybody 4 times, everybody in the Central 3 times, and everybody in the Eastern Conference 2 times.
I would be in favor of that 100%. And the NHL did expand to 84 games for 2 years in the 90s before they went back to 82. And I mean, what really is 2 more games? I mean, I'm sure the Players Association,
in the preseason game anyways.
Yeah. And look, the PA is probably going to push back a little bit and say, well, we have to draw a line on the number of games we're playing at some point. But think about how much money there is to be made. 2 extra games, 1 extra home date for every NHL club. It makes sense. And for players like McDavid, and there's only 1 of him, but for any elite players that are chasing milestones like 50 goals, 100 points, having those 2 extra games, it just gives you even a little more runway to hit those marks.
Have all the proceeds from those extra 2 games go straight to escrow and see how fast the NHLPA signs off on it.
Yeah,
Right? Like,
especially
there's
with
a
the
way to
escrow
do
they have
it.
to pay back too, right? So I mean,
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, for sure. There's a way to do it. There's always a way. It's about the money. It's always about the money.
but yeah, I mean, I am looking forward to some of those games because despite where the Oilers are in the standings, and I think that's a good time for us to kind of like turn over to talking about that right now. They're sitting 4 games over 500. The Flames leapfrogged them again last night after beating the Seattle Kraken, but they're right there. I mean, they're within striking distance still of LA and Seattle ahead of them for second or third in the division, and I'm still confident the Oilers will finish in second in the Pacific. It looks like Vegas is going to be pretty tough to catch at this point, but I'm not overly scared of either the Kings or the Kraken. I think the Oilers are a better team than both of them. And once they get healthy and the schedule gets a little lighter, because Dash, we've both watched this season so far. The first half was loaded with cup contenders and division leaders and top teams. Now, the Oilers also have blown games against teams they should beat. They lost to St. Louis when they had a 2-goal lead in the third period. They lost to one of the worst teams in the league, Anaheim, on home ice on a matinee. They just dropped a game where they had a 2-goal lead against the Canucks in the first period last week. I mean, these are games where the Oilers could easily have 6 more points than they do right now. They even gave up a point to Nashville in overtime. But they've beaten teams like Carolina, they've beaten Tampa, they've beaten Pittsburgh. They've shown that they can handle these top teams in the league. It's just a matter of now, when they start to get to play the odd, weaker team. They haven't played Philly yet. They haven't played Columbus or Chicago. And I'm not necessarily saying that the Oilers need to bank on playing weaker teams to improve their record. They've shown they can beat good teams too. It's just, I mean, even Dallas, it's very strange to me, and that just kind of speaks to the roller coaster ride that this season's been, that they beat Dallas in one of their most complete efforts of the season by 3 goals, and then they just come back with a stinker the very next game on home ice against Vancouver. But if they can avoid playing down to their competition, is what I'll say, and take advantage of one of the easier schedules the rest of the way. I believe they had the second most difficult schedule in the first half, and they have the third easiest schedule in the second half. Make some hay there, build that record back up, and get geared up for another playoff run.
Yeah. You said roller coaster. Remember the roller coaster last year?
It was different though.
Roller coaster we ever had, and here we are again. And you're right. But
peaks and valleys are nothing new to this team.
Exactly. Do you think that we play down to our competition, or do you think that we just have a problem with letting the fight come to us before we bring the fight to them?
That's part of it. I mean, slow starts are a factor.
Exclusive?
It is a factor, but when there's 9 minutes left in a game against St. Louis and you have a 3-1 lead, you need to lock that down. When it's 2-0 to start the second period against the Canucks, that's a game that you have to make sure you take to the finish line. And sometimes you just get goalied by a team, right? Like they got goalied by Buffalo, they got goalied by Anaheim. It's going to happen from time to time. It's just, I do think that they get up to play the top teams in the league, and we've seen that. And sometimes, like they'll walk over Arizona 8-2, and then Anaheim comes to town, and you think it's going to be another one of those laughers, but in reality, those players still have pride too, and they're NHL players, and you can't just come in and say, well, we're going to steamroll these guys. You have to prepare for that game just like any other.
Yeah, there's no doubt. It only just stings slightly less because Kessler isn't there anymore. That's all I have to say.
I do love that the Oilers have beat up on the Ducks a lot in the last few years. I mean, it sort of has made up for a lot of the pain that the Ducks dished out to the Oilers, let's say in the late 2000s, early 2010s.
Well, nothing's going to make up
for the 2017 playoffs. I mean, that's the number one.
Yeah.
I do think that the Oilers exercised some demons by getting to the conference final this past year because they deserve to go to the conference final in 2017. They had to wait another 5 years to get there, but it finally happened for them.
Yeah, and who would have thought it'd been 5 more years, in fact, right? Well,
Well,
let's hope they do it for the next 5 years.
yeah, I mean, this team is set up to have several deep playoff runs over, let's say, like you said, 5 to 10 years, and hopefully at least one of those seasons ends with the Oilers winning their last game.
Absolutely. Hallelujah.
Dash, before we call it a night, I just wanted to talk a little about Sam Gagner, who played in his 1000th NHL game tonight. And actually, his Winnipeg Jets did the Oilers a favor by beating the Vancouver Canucks 4-2. You know, Gagner was a player who was a 6th overall pick for this team. He was viewed from the start as one of the players who was going to turn around an Oilers club that had bottomed out in 2006, 2007 and traded away Ryan Smith. He never quite reached that level of a top line star producing player that I think the Oilers thought they might be getting with him at 6th overall in 2007. But he was just a heart and soul guy who could produce 45 points for you year after year, and was just someone who was so loved by his teammates. He would fight when he didn't even have to, and he was ill equipped to, but this was a guy who just gave it all for the team, loyal to the Oilers. And I think that of all the of any active Oilers player that's still in the league that's moved on to another team, he would have to be right up there with one of the most popular. And I wish that he would have spent his whole career as an Oiler. But I just want to get a thought or two from you on Gagner's time in Edmonton and just his career overall.
Yeah, my brother still makes fun of me for him being one of my all-time favorite players. So, I mean, I'm super happy we are going to talk about this. I'm old enough to remember watching Dave Gagner. So, I know where that competitive spirit comes from. I know where that fire comes from. Dave Gagner was never the biggest guy in a fight. And I doubt that his son is either. Like it's just been I don't know, too bad that he maybe didn't reach some of the offensive potential, but he's played 1,000 games in the league and very few people can say that. So, a testament to finding a way, similarly to how his kid line centerman, Andrew Cogliano, did the same. That was, along with Nielsen, was the line to be when Ryan Smith was gone, and that was going to be our future. So, he comes out of London. Him and Kane had 300 points or something on the same line, between them, 250 points or something crazy like that. So all projections stated so, right? He's the son of an amazing player, and it just turned out that he had to change his game. I was at the 8-point night versus Chicago.
Oh, wow.
One of our customers actually took us to a suite that game. So my tum-tum was not only full of the warm and fuzzies, it was full of some beer and chicken wings. And one of the greatest nights I can ever remember in that rink. I'll never forget that my colleague that I went with, because the game was a blowout, wanted to beat the traffic and left early.
Oh, wow.
Just like classic all-time fail.
Yeah. Never leave early.
Never. Just awesome. In fact, I'll sidebar for a story since you love mine so much, but I'm stealing this one. I was just on vacation, as you know, and I was reading the book Beauties by James Duthie. And this reminds me of why you would never and should never leave a game early. But at the World Junior Championship, when Jordan Eberle scores the famous goal that he did versus the Russians, the score was 4 third period. And I think his name was Dmitry Petrov or something, scores for the Russians to go up 5-4 with about 45 seconds left, as we all remember. And at that point in time, I think Duthie said his parents were 80 years old or north of 80 years old, and hated driving in traffic and hated driving in the dark. So what James did is, look up over his dad, who was watching the game in the TSN booth with him, and said, maybe this is a good time for you to beat traffic. The Russians are up here. They got the momentum. You'd probably be safe to go to your car now. And so, of course, they listen to their son, and Mr. and Mrs. Duthie take off to the car while Jordan Eberle scores one of the most exciting goals in Canadian history, and the Canadians go on to beat the Russians in overtime. So when James got home, he asked his dad what he thought of the game. and how it finished. And apparently, James Duthie's dad's answer to him was clearly, "I should have stopped having kids after your two older sisters." so another reminder of why you never leave a game early. You just never know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows that game from Sam and the 8 points, and I'll never let my colleague live that down. But one of my favorite memories from Sam Gagner actually came at another time. It was against the Islanders. I think it was early in the year in 2019. And I was at that game as well. And it was Sam Gagner's first goal
back with the Oilers. Yeah.
And man, go back and watch it after we're done. The emotion on his face looked like he scored the clenching goal to make it to the playoffs. Like he was just, you could tell the way that his teammates celebrated with him and how important it was for him. And I don't know, that one kind of sticks with me too.
I think it was late in the 2018-19 season. It was about a week after he had rejoined the team because I believe they were on the road when the trade happened. He was playing in the AHL with the Toronto Marlies. He'd been loaned there by the Vancouver Canucks. And and then when they dealt him for Ryan Spooner, I feel like he got a rent-a-car and drove down to wherever the Oilers were playing in the U.S. at the time, maybe Buffalo. So that was it's funny you point that goal, the Islanders, yeah. But that's a good point that you make about that first goal back at Rogers Place. Actually, his first goal ever at Rogers Place as a member of the Oilers. Because he had been traded back when they were still playing at Rexall. So it looked like a great moment for him. I remember his first hat trick against the Avalanche back, I want to say in 2009. He was a guy like we talked about. He'd step up and fight, when he probably wasn't the first guy who should have been jumping in there, and just all the shootout moves. Like just I can't even think of one particular one. Maybe there was one against the Minnesota Wild, the first time that he busted out that insane move that he has where he goes like forehand, backhand, forehand. But it's just he gave us so many cool moments. The 8-point night in 2012 is always going to stand out above the rest. But just, this is a guy who really bled orange and blue. And I would still love if he could finish his career in Edmonton, whether he signs a one-day contract or retire as an Oiler or whatever happens. But he's a guy who obviously loved his time here, and he married an Edmonton girl. There was that picture back in the summer where he was he had his Oilers shirt still draped over his exercise bike. So even in the off season when he's an unrestricted free agent and he's wearing his old Oilers gear still, it shows that this team still holds a place in his heart.
Yeah, man. The Edmonton Oilers fans always love those heart and soul, once an Oiler, always an Oiler guys. Right? He's in the same class as Ryan Smith and Jason Smith and Bucky and some of those guys that'll just, never go away in our hearts. When you become that good of a teammate and that good of a human, honestly, just congratulations, Sam. It's a hell of a way to get 1,000 games.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's just great guy, someone I've followed from his entire career. We're both born in 1989, so he always wore the 89 on the back of his jersey. I loved that. And just, probably outside of Ryan Smith, maybe the guy who bled, like we said, orange and blue more than anyone else over the last decade and a half. And you know what else? I've only been to one Oilers game this year, and I don't even think I knew that you were a season ticket holder. So maybe we'll have to run into each other at a game sometime this year.
Did you go to the Ryan Smith game?
I did. That's the only game I've been to so far this year.
I thought we tried and planned, but we were on the opposite end of the ring.
Yeah.
You were up high and I was down low, and I don't know. It just, yeah. But what we'll do is make it happen where you're sitting right beside me in our seats. That's the way we'll do it.
Yeah, it'd be great to go to a game with you sometime.
I love that you're Sam Gagner's draft year and I'm Ryan Smith's draft year.
There you go. And neither of us got picked, hey?
Yeah, weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could have been Bond Senior for all it mattered to the Oilers.
You had a little better shot at getting there than I did, but yeah. All right, man. Well, thanks so much. For anyone who isn't following you already, and I hope that everyone is, where can they find you on Twitter?
At Dash in the Park on Twitter, Dash in the Park on Facebook will work too. Just go to heavyhockey.com. That's where you can find all of us, and especially Eric and I, us two Saskatchewanians that love to sit down and talk hockey because we actually know our hockey, unlike those Haligonians and hooligans on the rest of our network. But no, just kidding aside. All the boys are great. So heavyhockey.com, that's where you'll find me, Eric, and the rest of us.
Awesome. All right, Dash, have a good night.
You too, Eric. Thanks again for doing this with me, buddy. Appreciate it.
So for Dash in the Park, I'm Eric Friesen. This has been the 99 Forever podcast. We're out.